the target audience is the target audience is younger people that will impulsively spend money more uh, more easily than someone that's older that has more sales resistance. So they're able to resist advertising more. And they're more um, they filter what their wants and their needs out from just the stuff that might be trivial, that may not or may not be saleable to a youngster. So these videos are intended for people over the age of 18. I have to say that every time because I understand advertising, right? And there's a demographic of younger people that are advertisers that advertising works better on. So there's more, they get better sales or better response from from that age group. So, and when you make your videos for adults, right, it's a difference. You're not targeting like high school kids or children under the age of 18 that shouldn't be. Children children under the age of 18 should not even be on the internet. Whoever their parents are or their guardians are, they shouldn't be on the internet unless there's a parent or a guardian that's supervising the child while they're on the internet. So somebody like me, and I go and I specifically say these videos are for people over the age of 18. I say that in the beginning, all right? It's an adult that's talking about adult things, um, mostly, right? Well, some of the time, not all the time, but so what I was going to talk about was that I can only speak from my own personal experience on this issue, which is dreaming, being remembering a dream. Uh, what was happening? What was happening to me while I was dreaming? And it would be easy to think, wow, maybe that was me in another lifetime. Maybe when I was before I was born as this person, that in a previous life I was what I was dreaming about happened to me, only it happened in another life. And like, okay, maybe I forgot that that was a dream, and I start thinking about it like maybe that was just another lifetime I had, and I'm remembering what happened to me in that previous lifetime. And I forget that, oh no, I was asleep and I was just making things up in my own mind while I was sleeping, and that's where that experience came from. It didn't really happen to me in real time while I was awake. As far as I can remember, it might be, well, sometimes my dreams, you know what they are, is they're composites of all these different experiences that I've had. So I'll be dreaming, especially with geography and location, right? When I'm dreaming and I'm in a certain place, it's a composite. It's like there's a building that was somewhere else in my life, and then there was a street. And then that building didn't belong on that street, and there was a place that was by the ocean, and it's like almost like it should be the way I remember when I was a kid being there. And it's a distortion of that. So I see AI, right? I look up AI videos that where I think what happens is you take different photographs or different snippets of different movies or videos, and you ask the AI to blend them together for you, and it will create a storyline. You just show a picture of an orange, show a picture of a cat, show a picture of a mountain, and show a picture of like a seagull, right? And what it'll do is it'll take that orange and it'll morph it into a cat, and the cat will be running and playing with the orange, and then it'll turn into a it'll turn into another animal, or it'll go someplace, and it whatever photos you lined up and you fed into the AI, it created a video, and it blended the two images together, and it distorted it, and it created a story of involving those images, and it made it into a video, like a real time, like so. But it looks really like distorted. It looks like the shadows, or there's more shadows than there should be, or there's like fuzzy areas on the image, on the in between images. There's one of Will Smith eating spaghetti, the actor Will Smith, and there's another one of Joe Biden and Donald Trump at the White House eating spaghetti, right? And then they made some other ones about McDonald's and other using them, you creating a McDonald's commercial or something to do with a advertisement. They did some that were pretty funny, that were Greta Thunberg, right? They did Greta Thunberg with like a four-wheel drive monster truck, and she's smoking a cigar. She's talking about how she's got this monster truck, and she loves to hear it, and growling and driving and running it up and down on the in the out in the brush, right? And then you see her on a driveway. She's next to the truck, and there's smoke coming out of the exhaust, and she's talking about how much she loves the smell of diesel. Yes, I guess a parody, right? I mean, take desperate things like that. Someone that's really concerned about the environment, and someone else that's not. It just wants to have a good time and will burn however much gas, doesn't care, just live it up, burn as much fuel as you want and not care, right? So, but she's like someone, oh yeah. And there was another one. There was another one of like, it's a gym, right? So whatever the AI, it allowed people to make an AI movie, but it was specifically on only one on a certain subject, right? In a certain subject category. You couldn't deviate and make an AI movie about whatever you wanted to make it about. You had to stick with like a McDonald's or spaghetti, or a gym commercial, like a fitness gym or that, and then put the characters in those, create characters out of the real world, and put them in the place, and then make up a storyline of that. If a gym, they're in a gym, show Donald Trump holding weights up in a gym. Or there was another one, a gym of Kim Sung, the North Korean dictator, right? He was at the gym, right? He's holding weights up, and they took serious people, like, in the world, right? I mean, serious leaders in that, and they made like fun of them in a McDonald's commercial, or they did it with some actors too. But dreams are, and then I start watching these AI generated uh, um, spoofs, right? Or it was called, what's that magazine that? I'm trying to remember the name of the magazine I used to get. It's an adult magazine, but it's not. It's not pornographic. It's just adult. Could have been some, but it's just like adult humor. Um, they did. John Belushi did the skit from that. Or no, they had that. Yeah, they were. They did the whole vacation with um, who was the guy in Vacation? They have Vacation in America, European Vacation, Vegas Vacation, Chevy Chase. Yeah. So they were they were the studio that did that, but a lot of those ideas came out of the magazine that they had. But the whole AI thing, it looks like a dream. I mean, some of it looks like what I would see in a dream. If you haven't seen those AI generated videos anywhere on YouTube, look it up, and tell me, does it look like some of it kind of looks like something you would imagine, right? Something that would like you would dream about, and you'd see that. The other thing is it would be hard to carry over information. So if you were another body at some other time in the past, then like your skin, all your skin cells and bone cells and cells that go in the tissue that went up to make up the body, and that in, in any memories that were held in a pattern of neural tissue, right? So your neurons and your fibers of the dendrites and the axon fibers, all of the arrangement of the cells in the nerves in the brain tissue that recorded the events as memories from the previous life, that just decomposed, turned into dust. So really, you can't say you can't say, in all honesty, you can't say that I remember this event if you weren't a physical, if it didn't physically actually happen to you, right? The only thing that you could say would be like epigenetics. You could say that, well, the memories were like in my great grandfather, right, or my great great grandfather. He was working in a mine or a coal mine or some kind of mine. He was mining material out of the earth underground. He was spending a lot of time digging in the earth, right? So moving material around. So did has that like do I have some like strange more am I more inclined to be in that in my profession, or is like that am I drawn to that kind of work myself because I have inherited that the genes that were passed on to me that came from my father and his dad and my great grandfather and my great great grandfather and his dad and his father and his father and his father. The physical properties of my tissue of this body remembers their experiences that they had in a very, not in a detailed way, but in a kind of a gross way, like the same way that instincts that you have, that you could say an animal has an instinct. The hermit crab has an instinct to go find a shell and live in another shell, right? Or the a bird can do weaving, right? And it knows how to do weaving. It wasn't taught that. It just has that. It has the instructions in its brain that it was born with to know how to weave a nest together, or something in an instinct that an animal has. So you could say that, okay, you did reincarnate, but you reincarnated like your predisposition for eating um, um, potatoes, maybe, or some kind of food, right? So you'd like a certain kind of food, or you want that kind of food more than you would eat any other kind of food. It's just a normal part of your regular diet. You eat a lot of that specific kind of food, and certain other people eat a different kind of food a lot, right? So they're whatever their inclination is to eat and to have a craving for that kind of food, that it could be indicative of an ancestor that was like always had to fish all the time. So they fished, but they fished at this certain area and they were eating this kind of fish, a certain kind of fish, generation after generation after generation. And then you're born, and the the chain, the link in the chain's been broken of that familial life of that of eating that fish, right? So your great grandfather, your great great grandmother ate that fish. Their parents ate it. Their parents ate it, and then they migrated, and your genes, you got the genes passed on to you. Part of the genes from them go into you, and then you're you're going about your life, and then you someday somebody gives you a piece of fish, right? And it's from that same area of the world, and you eat it, you barbecue it and eat it, and you're like, wow, this is like, I feel like I need this food, is like I'm made to eat this kind of food, or this kind of food was made to be eaten by me, or so I kind of think, well, if you reincarnate, then it won't be a specific detail memory of an event. It'll be a predisposition for, or a craving for certain kinds of food, or maybe you're like, all your ancestors, they were like divers, and they were like in this one village, right? And there was a in the village there was a family, and everyone in their family could dive, and they could hold their breath underwater for a really long time. So that gave them that gave them the one up. They got the ability to like do spearfishing underwater, so they were more successful, able to pass on the genes, and that just became a strength that they passed on, their ability to hold their breath underwater for a long time. Now, you maybe that you're like, maybe someone in your family line had that, was from that area or that tribe that could do that, or that family in the tribe had the ability to do that, and you could do that, but you wouldn't. Um, it wouldn't be you remember doing that when you were alive in another lifetime. It would just be that your body's capable of knowing how to do that better. If you see what I'm saying, reincarnation is not, you don't really remember specific things. If there is a memory at all involved with a genetic, with the whatever the DNA is, right? Let's say they know what what most of the DNA, um, they know a different, they can measure differences between DNA, right, from one person to another person. They can see distinct differences in the genome, the way it's arranged. And but I don't think, do they know every specific part of the gene and exactly what it does, what it controls, I mean, because that portion of the DNA molecule is how your the length of your bones, and where your hair, what color your hair is, and your color of your eyes and your skin, and the size of your body, and where or the positions of your organs, and then the instructions for how that organ gets, the proteins go together to make up the organs, and that. So those, the part of the DNA molecule, that strand of DNA, could be a memory of an event in your ancestors, but not the event of one specific person's life, but just the accumulation of a trait that was dominant from that in your family line. So that would be reincarnation in a physical sense. Now, I was arguing with my brother on the phone, and he was it, it he's convinced that people that die and then come back to life, that he's thoroughly convinced that these people really had an experience, um, and that it just wasn't in their own brain. It's like you die and then you float, or you fly out of your body, you become separated from your physical body while you're dead, and then you're still like a ghost or a phantom, and you're having another experience outside of your physical body while your physical body is dead. Then they revive you. These people get revived, and then they remember, oh, I was a ghost, I was flying around, I went up into the sky, I looked down on the earth, I was able to like go to different places really fast, and like do like astral travel around, and then I came back, and 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 now I'm here and I'm alive again. But they talk about meeting loved ones, that they met like a beautiful woman that was like with light coming out of her, and she was all full of warmth and love, and she gave you a hug, and that was your grandmother. Or there was people that you met that had passed away, and then you come back and talk about like that, like it really happened. Whereas your brain, when your brain is dying, and when you're asleep too, and having an REM dream, a lucid dream, you're dreaming a vivid dream, that would be the same, right? Why would you say, no, you're dead and you're actually really alive still and you're floating around? No, and you're dead for good, and you're not coming back, right? It's over with. it's you can't start talking about like you're going to go on and be still be the same person, but be going somewhere else and leave the world and go to another world and all that. That to me, that's nonsense. To me, that's like a made up story. That's like somebody that's selling a book, or they're on a lecture tour, or they're trying to get attention, draw attention to themselves and become popular, and tell people a story and make it manipulate it so that make the story so that when you tell it, you'll other people will like be comforted by that, or they'll go ooh, and they'll like to hear the story, right? And the narrative is that it's like, well, no, how do you know that? There's no physical, there's no solid evidence of anything about another life. We don't. Eventually, we're all going to individually have to cross that bridge. I'm going to cross a bridge. You're going to cross a bridge. Everybody, you can't. There's no way of getting around it. You can't. You can't bargain with the angel of death. You can't beg the angel of death. Oh, please, I don't want to die. Don't take me. I want to stay alive on the earth forever. I want to be here immortal. Don't, please, I don't want to die. You can't argue with the angel of death about that. But it appears to be in the world that there are people that have overcome death. Somehow they really believe that, well, they're Christians. That's the other thing. So Christians believe that in the end they're gonna come out of the grave. They're gonna be a body again, a young 30-year-old or 28-year-old body, right? A person and they're gonna be like, it's a story that you're told when you're a child. So little children are told stories. And when the little children are growing up with the adults are telling them about a man that really was God, and that he came to the earth from another place, and he was a son of a dad. There was a dad that gave him, put him here on this earth, and he healed the sick, and he created he did miracles, right? And he went around teaching people about what God was supposed to be and what God wanted from humans. And then he was tortured to death, and he dies, and then he comes back to life for a few days, and he's visiting his friends, and then he leaves floats into the sky. Says, "Oh, if anybody believes, then they're going to be with me, right? They're going to get to go to the good place and be saved and all that." So I guess a lot of people take that very seriously, but I don't. I was like, I spent a long time after I went to junior college, because I did get exposed to secular humanism and atheism in at junior college, and when I was 19, in my late teens and early 20s. But I always had reservations about there being a God for a long time. But as of lately, yeah, when I come into contact with someone that has that belief structure in their mind, and it appears to be that they're serious about it, that it's just not a fashion, that they're really actually really do believe these stories that were told thousands of years ago, and they take them very seriously, that I go away, and then when I'm by myself, I start thinking there is this God there. I start thinking these people really believe there's this God there, and so I just kind of let my guard down, and I go on, shouting, screaming, yelling, fist holding my fist in the air, banging, holding my fist in the air, yelling and screaming, and shouting really as hard as I can without hurting myself, at being angry, right? Being really pissed off. I get really, really pissed off at God. But then I realized, okay, no, 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 this is just made up. People have made this up, this idea up, since they didn't understand what nature was, in the natural world. It's a holdover from that, and it's like it can't, it can never. The God, they said, well, Nietzsche, whoever, or Hegel, probably more Nietzsche, said God is dead. God, there is no God anymore. The God that people believe in is a dead God. It's just a relic from another age, from an era, it's a meme, right? I say religion is kind of like gorilla glue. If you get gorilla glue on your hands and you try to wash it off, and then you get alcohol, you try to rub it off, and then you get like uh, I don't know what you clean it with, diesel fuel, right? Yeah, or something like gasoline. I don't know how you get gorilla glue off your skin, but if you could make an analogy to religion, is what gorilla glue is when you get it on your skin, but religion is in your brain. It goes in your brain and it sticks inside of your brain, like the same way gorilla glue would stick on your skin. So I am not in any way. I don't believe in the God anymore. I believe that there's aliens. Yeah, there could be aliens. There's no evidence for them, but the possibility is there, being the sheer immensity of the size of the universe, the scale at the size of the universe, both in time and in its extent. Looking at it from a scientific point of view, and 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 coming back with the opinion of that, oh, there is other life out there somewhere else. There has to be. There's so much of space. There's so much of the universe. It's so big and large in extent and scale that someone somewhere at some point in the past, somewhere, someone somehow was really, 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 really evolved, right? And very, 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 very intelligent. Much more intelligent than any of the most intelligent human beings, whatever being existed as an alien in the past or in now or in the future, is a really super intelligent being, and it's really smart, right? That it could appear to be like a god that created the universe. It could fool it could fool someone to thinking it was that, right? Because it's got all of this magical capability, which just really is just, it's a very intelligent and evolved organism that's had millions and millions of generations of generations of generations of others, such as itself, to accumulate knowledge, to build itself in an ordered fashion within a civilization of others like it. Could have reached a really high point in evolution as a form of consciousness. But I would say on a scale, it would have to be ethically evolved. I don't think you can have. I think Michio Kaku was right about there being predators, right? That evolution favors a predator which has the binocular vision, can see in 3D, sees from two eyes that's in the front. So whatever is evolving, that predatory kind of organism would become the apex on the hierarchy of the organism. And as they evolve, it's similar to how humans evolve. Once we learn language, and then we learn to record a language, and then we learn manipulation of fire, and how to manipulate our environment around us, use tools, and explore, and be and and keep a record of history. Then another alien race that's already evolved, that's millions of years advanced of us, could be very, very far ahead of us. That would appear as a god. You could think of it as a god, but it wouldn't be. It wouldn't be the god in the traditional sense of the biblical god, because the biblical god has all these personality problems, right? It's jealous, it murders, it encourages incest, and it favors a race over another. It's a racist. It's it's it has a temper, uh, and it's like the Greek pantheon, right? The same thing with their gods, right? Well, the biblical God is just kind of like the Greek, one of the pantheons, one of the gods in the Greek mythologies, the legends. So if you study ancient history and you know about Mesopotamia, you know about the the Euphrates, and the Babylonians, and the early tribes that lived in the Middle Eastern area even before the Old Testament was written. So before the Old Testament was written down, like in India, in the Indus Valley, they were recording events and that, and they have a whole a familiar history of their own dynasties, of people that have come and gone and come and gone before there was the Mess people in the Middle East, in the kingdom of Ur, the Babylonians and the Amorites and the Hittites and the tribes that weren't Hebrew. There was all these other tribes that weren't Hebrew. The Hebrews were the ones that left Egypt with the capability of writing, right? So when they left Egypt, which happened probably more than one time, there was probably exoduses. There was with an S, right? There was just not one exodus. There was probably several exoduses. And they just made the story into it happening one time. So for me, they left and they had the papyrus reeds, so they were keeping records for the pharaoh, right? And working under in the court, right, and writing things down. So the Hebrews left, and they took that with them. They took the monotheism with them too, from when Pharaoh Akhenaton uh, proclaimed that there's only now we're getting rid of we're no longer having many gods. We're only going to have the one God, which was the sun god, right, which Akhenaton initiated. So there's a lot of correlation, also similarities between the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Book of Job. Um, so yeah, and then we create we imagine, because when we were children, the adults told us stories. So we think, well, now we're an adult, and we I shouldn't say we, because I don't. I've since changed my mind about the Bible, um, Old Testament, New Testament. There was a period in my life, though, where I was like a born again Christian. I was like believed I was filled with a spirit which was holy. That it was like I had received like a power of God into my soul, right? I absorbed this power, came into me, and I was able to like speak in another language. And if all I had to do is believe strongly enough, as long as if the trick was believing. Because the more you believed, the less doubt you had, then the more it could happen. It could really happen. You could do a miracle. You could perform like a miraculous healing or prophecy or whatever. If you had the power of the God came to you, if you opened yourself up to this power and it came inside of you and took over your body, then it would give you like the ability to produce like healing powers and talk in other languages, or be able to know what another person is talking about in another language. That was the other one. So, but the people of the period of time, Jesus Christ was it he wasn't just one. To me, I believe he wasn't just one person. That the Jesus Christ that's written about in the Gospels, that to me, the way I understand that is that's more than one person. There's actually somebody that's like a really good at speaking. They have a strong voice and they're a good orator, and they're a very good looking man, right? A very pleasant to look at man, has a very loud voice that talks really clearly, right? So there was him. And then there was another guy who was like a magician, right? Or he had like long sleeves and he could like make doves come out, and he could like do magic tricks. He could like take powders and mix it together and put it in water and make the water taste like fruit juice or wine or something. Maybe he had some access to some kind of chemistry that, and then and then he was the one that knew, like he could like entertain children, right, with like magic tricks and that. And then there was another guy, and he knew how to read and write really well, right? He knew the old Hebrew, the Torah, the Torah and all that. He knew it really well inside and out, and he read it all the time. And he got taught in the temples. And he was another guy, and then there was like several different guys, and they just combined all the stories together and made it into one person. And you think it's a super person, when it's really just, oh, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. And at the time, when it was in that time period, it wasn't just that one guy. Well, there was probably the one guy that got crucified, right? That was the one that was the one that knew the scriptures, right? Him. And then there was the other guys that were like a magician, him, and then the doctor. The guy was a medical doctor, and then the other guy that could talk really loud. He had a really nice appearance. He was a good-looking man. He was tall, and he could speak, and he talked loud, and people could hear him far away when he talked. He was another guy. He was a poet, and he was the one that did all of that that was like part of the group of the other ones, and then they just combined them together, and they had one guy. So um, why wouldn't that person, if they're still around, if they exist, if Jesus Christ, the person of Jesus Christ, if they still existed today and they were around somehow, maybe they're just an alien race that's really advanced, and Jesus Christ was an alien that was given the ability to come to become alive as a human being and live on this planet. But as it was, the stories were told as if they were gods, but they didn't understand that they maybe were aliens that were visiting this earth in ancient times, and they were just like in Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they're they have the prime directive, right? And they're observing, and they're not really getting too involved with affecting the evolution on the planet. So maybe our evolution, maybe human history, you don't know, millions, maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago, aliens came by the earth and they found humans, and they were monkeys, and it was like 2001 Space Odyssey, and they left the obelisk there so that when the humans reached a certain point in evolution, they would find it on the moon and make some connection with the aliens using the obelisk, using that big square rectangular black thing, whatever was in 2001 Space Odyssey. So that could have been in the human history. It could have been that, like that, like in the beginning of that movie Prometheus. It's a really cool scene in the beginning of the movie Prometheus, where the alien comes to the earth, and the earth isn't even, there's no life on the earth. It's just like waterfalls, and it looks like somewhere in Iceland, right? But you see these huge waterfalls, and the alien stands there all like blue, right? A different color. And he's humanoid like, and he's wearing like a loincloth, and he opens a container, and he like drinks it, and then he starts dying, right? And he falls in the water, in the waterfall, and he's falling into the waterfall, tumbling around. Then they show this inside of his body all breaking apart, and then they show DNA molecules splitting off of him and going into the water, and then they show the water changing, and they show it in like evolution, like he somehow, the alien Somehow in the beginning of the movie Prometheus, it's really cool. The idea of what they did in the beginning of the movie Prometheus is like, wow, that's really cool. But it was that the aliens started evolution on this world. It was like, well, if you think about it, the DNA, there is no other life that's non DNA RNA related, right? Everything's that's alive, that's a plant or an animal, is that deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the ribonucleic acids. It's that same, the base for every living thing is the same. So that's what I've been told. The way I understand it, science hasn't found anything else that's another kind of life form. We only know that life form. And if an alien came here and they seeded the world, and then all they had to do is just take a little bit of it and put it in all the conditions were just right. They found a planet like this one that was just the right amount of gravity. Just they had a moon. The moon was just the right amount of distance. It had it had a tide. It had the temperature was just right. It had the mineral composition in the oceans, and that was just right to they could seed this world with something, and they seeded this world, and we just don't. There's no evidence of that. I mean, we can't. No one can prove or disprove that. But the idea of that happening, it could be right. You couldn't say no. We don't. It could never happen. You couldn't tell me that. No. Though that can't happen. That's impossible. There's there's a lot of like things like that. If you think about a universe that's infinite, if you think about all the things that could happen that are that are possible in within the laws of physics, within the physical laws of nature, all the possible things that could happen, and then an infinite universe. If you take those two ideas and you merge them together, all possible things that could physically happen and an infinite universe, the universe that has no beginning or no end, or it may not, it may be just it had a different it kind of plasma, whatever it was, an unbroken sphere of pure energy or some kind of plasma, right, or some kind of unification of a subatomic. It was just a single subatomic particle, and it was perfectly symmetrical. It was undisturbed, and then it fractured. It hit instantaneously. It went into a um, supercooled liquid state, right? So if it's supercooled liquid, like supercooled liquid water, if it's perfectly almost freezing temperature, and there's no disturbance at all, the water will not form into an ice. It will stay. It'll just stay super cooled. The temperature could keep falling and falling and falling, and it would never form into ice. It would be only until it was disturbed, until there was a shard that formed on that in that mass of water that was super cooled, and then instantaneously it would turn into ice, like within like really fast amount of time. It wouldn't just start in one spot and spread. It would just like all of a sudden everywhere within that ice, it would be there would be ice crystals, right? That's how it's really fast. Well, in the beginning of the universe, it was the way it's explained is, well, they use those particle accelerators to to recreate the conditions of the early universe by speeding up in the magnet in the rings, and they're made with they take these magnets and they put magnets all the way around these rings, and they put an element in there, and they spin it around, and it goes faster and faster and faster, and then they pass it off to another ring system, and it spins, and then there's a target, and they smash it into a target, and they can see how it's when it breaks apart. They can see the remnants in a like in a chamber, in a cloud chamber. They can see what spills out of it when they break it apart. And they say that in the early universe, the temperatures were super, 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 super. It was neither really hot nor really cold. It's weird the way they explain it. It's like all of a sudden, instantaneously, it goes from being 0 degrees to being like so many thousands of orders of magnitude heated within like just an instant of a fraction of a moment, right? It was all of a sudden it's just from a tiny little spot of a subatomic particle into a vast, uh, and it's still happening. It's spreading apart. At the very edges of the universe are still at the very edge of the known universe. There is probably that's the way it was at the Big Bang, right? So there's probably a state that's so far away that was the way it was in the early universe. It's still going out there and it's expanding outward. And then, but it's everywhere too. So it's not in just one place. It's not in a coordinate place, but those coordinates everywhere is that. It's kind of hard to explain. But, and if anything at all is possible, right, within the laws of physics, and the size of the universe is the size that we understand it to be. We know how much bigger it is than we thought of it in ancient times. Even in the turn of the century, in the 1900s, even like when they had Mount Wilson and they built the Hale telescope there, and they built other refractor telescopes. They had an idea how big our Milky Way was. They actually thought our entire universe was the Milky Way, but then they had to rewrite the textbooks, right? When Hubble went out, Hubble looked through the Mount Wilson telescope and saw the other galaxies, because they didn't know what they were. They just thought maybe they were clouds around stars. No one knew it was an actual galaxy, Andromeda. But I'm sure, like maybe somebody like Giordano Bruno, he could see with his eyes. Maybe Giordano Bruno he had an exceptional ability to see really far with his eyes. So maybe he was like a straight like an a not like an like a what do they call not a throwback, but um so Giordano Bruno, he could have been a mutant. Maybe he had eyes that were mutated, that were like really like telescopic eyes. He could look at the moon and he could see all the detail of the craters of the moon. He could look at Jupiter. He could see the moons, and that he knew it was just obvious to him. This is the way it is. There's more than one world. We are not the only world. So he could see more clearly in the sky than other people. And because I thought, oh, I heard Giordano Bruno. I read about him, and I know he died a horrible death. He was persecuted, that they killed, and it was my understanding that, oh, he must have had a telescope, right? He must have had he must have been like known Galileo, and like Galileo and him and Galileo were like um, what do they call? They're scholastic people that hang out together and do experiments together, and that a but Giordano Bruno, he was before they had the telescope, or maybe someone had a telescope and he had access to it. It would be interesting to see. Maybe there's history that's lost. Maybe there's more to what people knew in ancient times than what we think they knew. Because it's presumed that people were stupid back then. They didn't know, right? They were ignorant of a lot of things. Because they didn't have a microscope. They didn't have a telescope. They didn't have precise measuring equipment. They didn't know about refining elements. They didn't know about the periodic table. They didn't know about electricity, magnetism, it, um, radio waves, or anything like that, right? But they had lots of time. Like the people that were wealthy, that had a lot of time, that had servants that could spend time and study the natural world and look at it, really observe the natural world, because they had a servant that would cook for them, clean for them, uh, maintain their house for them, uh, work, produce things, clothing and food, and just give them everything they were. All their needs were met, and all they had to do is just have leisure time and study the natural world. So there were people that were doing that. And maybe they were really smart, but they weren't writing everything down. Maybe they did the script. Maybe they figured things out that that we take for granted, that we know of today. That back then they just couldn't. Maybe if they started. So it's. I think people that have information, that are informed, that are learned, guard their learning. They think to themselves, I went through all the trouble. I had to register for class. I had to show up in the lecture hall. I had to go do lab work. I had to write reports. I had to answer to the professor and be and memorize a lot. And it took me years and years and years. It was very expensive. I had to sacrifice a lot of my when I was younger, my youth time. I could have been doing other things, and I sacrificed that time to learn about something and study something and learn it from a professional, and have um, and pay a lot of money to learn what I learned. So I'm just not going to be freely giving it away to the public, right, at large. And if they see somebody else that knows, and they're giving that information away to the public for free, they get really mad. How dare they? I had to go and learn. I had to go and I paid for Alan Watts. I sent Mark Watts, Alan Watts' son. I sent him checks in the mail for hundreds of dollars, over $1,000, to get his Alan Watts lectures and Alan Watts' courses, and to hear a lot of what Alan Watts said. And now they're just showing it. Now they're just people are copying Alan Watts' lectures and putting them out on the YouTube and for free. And here I am. I had to pay for all that. I spent a lot of money on Alan Watts. So I understand why people would be mad that someone that had to go and learn something at a college and read about it and study it and do research and spend a lot of money, right? And now they owe a lot of money, and now here's somebody out there giving it away for free, right? What they had to go through the trouble of learning. So I can kind of see there's a resentment there that people would have against intellectuals that aren't following any like guidelines about like if you're in a union, you wouldn't really call it a union, but let's just say I was a professor of I had some specialty degree from a university, and there were colleagues, others that knew that subject also. We met at colleges, or we met at conventions, and it was only we only kept the knowledge within us, within our group, and anyone on the outside that starts delving into that, or wanting to know more about what our inner group knows, they should be muzzled. We need to keep a gate. There has to be a gatekeeper to guard our knowledge. We've accumulated, we've acquired knowledge. We have patent information, copyrighted information that's privy to company XYZ. Uh, Left a donation to the university for that wing of the college. It was dedicated to that one subject, that chemistry, battery chemistry, or some other, or like um, to make integrated circuits. There's a machine that there's certain principles or certain known physical laws that are privy to our group that we learned at the universities that the public doesn't. If the public knew about it, it would be giving away trade secrets. So being guarded about trade secrets and that and only allowing a certain person or certain people into the group to have dialogue and discussion on that is like a yeah, it's understandable, and so but I don't but when it comes to subjects like reincarnation and the idea of a personal rebirth or a rediscovering of another life that you've had, that you as a person have experienced being around on this earth as someone else in the past, or speculating about the possibility of a continuation of yourself, right? Of a different self, the same self, but a different self. Does that make any sense? So you were the same you that's experiencing reality, but your label is different, your shape is different, your hair is different, your gender is different, your species is different. You're just a consciousness, right? That's just come about again. That's the continuation of your consciousness that you are now. It continues on. Well, that idea is like, hey, you can't be talking about that. That's not allowed. There's only a certain group of people that are select people in the community that are allowed to talk about that or allowed to discuss that further. You don't know what you're talking about. You're not allowed. You don't have the proper credentials to be discussing that or talking about that in a public forum. So they would get mad that you are invading their turf about delving into those ideas. So there's kind of like a jealousy about being jealous about what you know, knowledge, jealousy of your knowledge. That, hey, I had to go to get training, I had to go to a seminar, I had to read these books, I had to go to bed, spend hours and hours and hours of meditation, intense meditation. I had to go travel and go to Tibet and sit at the tutelage of a monk, right, of a trained monk, and learn. And it was expensive and it was time consuming. And here this other person just gets on here and blah blah blah, starts blah blah blah, and they don't know what they're talking about. They didn't go to Tibet. They didn't learn under the tutelage of a monk, of a monk. They didn't go to the monastery to have special training and and be able to pick up the heated charcoal with both arms and put the tattoo. And they couldn't walk on rice paper and not leave their footprint there, and that be able to sit for a really long period of time in quiet and not move, and be like really in a really hot place, and be just sit there and be really still, or be in a really cold place and be able to have super abilities to withstand pain and discomfort, and be able to well, they didn't get training. They didn't have to go to Tibet. They didn't have to sit at the foot of the steps of the monastery with a begging bowl and beg to become allowed to learn under the master, and show like in that movie Fight Club, right, where they want to get into Fight Club. Well, the guy has to prove himself, and he has to. Well, Alan Watts talked about that, so there I go again. I have to honestly say, the guy he's had an influence on on my thinking a lot, especially when I was in my 30s. Because I was driving a lot in a car, I was listening on audiobooks a lot to his lectures. And that there was a series on by Jeffrey Mishlove called Thinking Aloud. Now, since my exposure and learning and being and hearing the lectures and the interviews that Jeffrey Mishlove gave to the different authors and scientists, um, I've since then have discounted a lot of woo. So I don't have the same regard as I did from like the physics, the physics. Yeah. So, yeah, I've been having to say I've been influenced by draft science a lot when it comes to my understanding of my view of physics. It's almost like it just goes to a level and then it stops. I don't go past it. I only think about what's physically possible in the real world, right? So there's a lot of authors that want to sell you books. And they want to sensationalize it, and they want to make it so they want to make exaggerated claims to get people interested. Yeah, I totally understand it. I understand people, they want to sell a book, they want to maintain their,